Thank you, Carol. Um, You know the drill. We're going to introduce ourselves and then have you introduce yourselves and your teacher, and then we'll give you the question and get going. And first of all, let me congratulate you on your participation here at the national finals. My name is Tom Tinder, and I am an attorney from Charleston, West Virginia.
I'm Robert Diane. I teach American government at the University of Evansville in Indiana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Eastburn. I am an attorney in Madison, Wisconsin.
My name is Savannah Keatley.
My name is Connor Olchak. My name is Eli Avey, and we are all students at Laurel High School in Mr. Deming's honor civics class.
Great. This is Unit 4, as Carol told us, and today we're going to do question number 1. And let me read that question to you. Quote, "It would be inconsistent with the constitutional separation of the executive and legislative powers to let the prerogative, pardon power, be exercised by the latter," close quote. What were the framers' reasons for giving the president the pardon power, and do you agree or disagree with them? According to the framer James Wilson, if the president abuses the pardon power, quote, "he can be impeached and prosecuted," close quote. Do you agree with Wilson? Why or why not? And in your opinion, what constitutes, quote, "high crimes and misdemeanors," close quote? You may begin.
The pardoning power was ceded to the president on the grounds that it wouldn't be consistent with the separation of powers to give Congress the ability to pardon people. The framers were reluctant to give Congress the pardon power because, as Rufus King said, they are governed too much by the passions of the movement. There are several other reasons why the president should exercise his power instead of the legislature, many of which Hamilton compiled in Federal 74. One reason is that a single man of prudence and good sense is better suited to dole out mercy than a body of men. He also argued that the energy with which an executive acts would be essential to effective use of the pardoning power. Not only that, but he argued that a single person would be more reluctant to give out frequent pardons because poor decisions would reflect solely back on him. Overall, there are numerous reasons why the executive should hold the pardoning power instead of the legislature, but this isn't to say that there aren't some drawbacks with him holding that power. One of these faults is that one person may be more likely to abuse his power. When this issue was brought up at the Constitutional Convention, James Wilson was of the opinion that if the president did this, he could simply be prosecuted and impeached. Although this is what should be done, it isn't.
Fundamentally, we agree with James Wilson on his opinion that the president should be subject to impeachment and be held responsible for his actions in the case of excessive use of the pardon power. Even though we believe that this form of action should happen as stated, it probably won't in practice because most of the abuses of the pardoning power happen purely for political gain. In general, when a president is in an impeachment hearing, their political party will defend them, even if they are guilty of their crime. This would be especially true if they were being tried for an action that had direct political ties to their party. The first impeachment trial of President Trump began in 2019 for abuse of power. And even though there was some evidence that President Trump was guilty, there were 195 votes against impeachment, all of those coming from his own party who voted unanimously against impeachment. Not only would it be unlikely for a president to be impeached for political reasons, but more specifically, abuse of the pardon power hasn't been historically treated as an impeachable offense. There have been many egregious cases of misuse of the pardon power, but nobody has been impeached for it. If we subscribe to the original beliefs of the founders that presidents should be subject to impeachment hearings when they pardon people for any reason other than an unfortunate circumstance, then the following cases should have resulted in impeachment inquiry. When President Ford pardoned President Nixon for the cover of wiretapping the Democratic National Convention and abuse of pardon power. When President Clinton pardoned Mark Rich after Rich's ex-wife paid him to grant a pardon, and when President Kennedy nullified the Congressional Narcotics Act by pardoning everyone who was convicted under the act.
After studying the history of impeachment itself, along with what our founding fathers documented as impeachable offenses, we have concluded that high crimes and misdemeanors are actions by the president that blatantly violate the Constitution, prohibit constitutional officers from carrying out their duty, or completely undermine public confidence in their ability to perform the functions of the President of the United States. Undermining public confidence in a person's ability to function in their position is usually when impeachment happens. For example, in 1799, John Pickering, the first person to be federally removed by impeachment, was impeached for being intoxicated on the bench. Andrew Johnson was impeached for removing the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, without consent of the Senate, which was a blatant violation of the checks put on the president within the Constitution. Even though these are typically the charges that presidents are impeached for, a person can still be impeached for an offense that is unrelated to their role in government. This happened more recently in 1998 when President Clinton was impeached for perjury because he lied about his affair with Monica Lewinsky. Even though the lie about the affair didn't impede on his ability to lead an office, it was still considered under the umbrella of impeachable offenses. In 1974, President Nixon had to resign he would have been impeached for the following reasons. He prohibited constitutional officers from doing their jobs by listening to their private conversations and undermined the public's confidence by using an illegal wiretap.
The reality of pardons is that today many are used for the wrong reasons, and if we subscribe to the ideals of the founding fathers, presidents should be under stricter scrutiny for their poor choices. Despite all of that, the decision of placing the pardoning power in the hands of the president was the wisest choice for the public. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you very much. Let's turn our attention to the impeachment process for a moment. You highlighted and specifically mentioned that 4 presidents have been impeached and none of them have been convicted. What suggestions do you have for ways to make the impeachment process stronger? And I'm not asking whether or not they're attainable, but what ideas would you have as to ways to make the impeachment process more successful?
Right, so we've actually seen a precedent set through impeachment trials that the power of impeachment has almost become a paper power because no president in history has become convicted and removed from office. And like we said in our written response, usually that happens because their political parties back them up. The specific example that we had was that in President Trump's first impeachment trial, 195 people voted against them, and that was a unanimous vote from the Republican Party. So I would say that the best thing that we can do is try to break up those main political parties to help make impeachments less political.
We have to do our part as citizens to elect people to our Congress that are going to have ethical viewpoints and not always back up their party, even when there's a flagrant abuse of power or violation. They will actually do the right thing, convict when convictions need to happen. So,
Thank you.
My ears perked up when you mentioned Alexander Hamilton's reasoning and argumentation in the Federalist Papers. And he made a strong case for why the president should have the pardon power. And yet the things that he promised would happen have not happened. And you underscored why, how that's the case. What went wrong? Was Hamilton wrong when he wrote the essays, or has something changed since the 1780s?
Well, in the last 100 years, you can look and you can see a gradual rise in government power from the turn of the century to today. And presidents back around 1900, like Taft, only issued around 3 pardons, and now presidents are up around 500 apiece. So it's not really a reflection on why he wasn't really wrong, but the system itself has gotten to where the government's been too powerful on its own, and just the pardoning power is a reflection of that overuse of power. And some of Hamilton's other essays, I believe one of them was Federal 68. He also talks about how the Electoral College is going to elect people that have the whole country behind them, and they're going to be very moral people, people that are good leaders for the country. And I don't want to say, I will say that that's broken down in the last 100 years. So there's been more strictly political uses of the pardon power, like flagrantly bad political pardons, particularly since Watergate and Nixon, but certainly the last 100 years.
Right, and I still agree with Hamilton in that Federalist paper that the president was the right choice to have this power, because even though there are really bad cases of the pardon power, we would still see that same kind of action in Congress and in the congressional bodies, because they're just as political as the president is.
Okay.
So I understand from your presentation that it seems to me that you are all in agreement that there's been an abuse of the pardon power, which to me begs the question of, A, what is the purpose of the pardon power? So I'd like you to answer that. And what would be a good example of a contemporary use of the pardon power?
So there's a couple different schools of thought when it comes to the pardon power. One of the holdovers from the English system was that the pardon was more of like a divine act of grace on the part of the king. And once that kind of idea came to America, we kind of shifted to that's not how it's supposed to be, because we don't like kings, obviously. So it kind of shifted to the pardon should happen when letting that person off of their crimes is beneficial for the good of the people as a whole. So like in times of rebellion and stuff, they were really worried about Shays' rebellion was a big topic during that time. So they were really focused on stuff like that, when they would bring the country together to pardon people and let them off their crimes, like the whiskey ring and stuff like that.
And I think that a good use of the pardon power currently is recently in Montana, we just passed a bill that says that a certain amount of marijuana is legal to have on your person. So I think that people who are serving time in jail because they were caught with marijuana should be found and pardoned, and states can pardon. So that is a thing that could happen today.
Going along those lines, our governors in our states have pardon power, and you don't hear a lot of controversy about that because there's some system or some procedure that's in effect at the state level for a person to be considered for a pardon. Do you think that we should use some of those same processes and procedures for pardon at the federal level?
Yes, for the most part, states have demonstrated good ideas. They're basically laboratories of democracy, as the founders would call them. And if you find a state that has a very good system for pardoning that is efficient and it's used the right way, then yeah, that would be a good state to use as a model for the national government to follow along the pardoning power, because it's obviously pretty broken currently.
Speaking of a broken system, about a year ago, a fellow said that he had the absolute right to pardon himself. What does the Constitution say about that?
Well, the Constitution doesn't come out outright and say you can't pardon yourself. It does say you can't pardon anybody for being impeached, which kind of lends itself to that fact. But not only that, but I think it goes against the grain of our entire governmental system that we don't believe that any one power is absolute. And the pardon power is also already absolute in the fact that the president can pardon anybody. So the president could also pardon himself, and it would be a complete absolute power held by one person. And that kind of just goes against the whole entire grain of the Constitution.
Right, and when the founders were creating the Constitution, what they wanted the president to basically look like and what they wanted him to do, they decided that not even the president, could be above the law the way that the kings were in England. So that's another founding principle that goes against being able to pardon yourself.
I understand that the pardon power is absolute in some sense, but does that mean it is not subject to judicial review? And if you don't think it's subject to judicial review, do you think it should be?
The president's ability to pardon people or commute sentences has been upheld in several different Supreme Court cases, and they were a long time ago. I don't know of any recent ones that have involved this, other than a commutement of sentences, where they can commute sentences or death penalties without taking away that person's life sentence. So I think it's pretty cemented in the judiciary now that the president has the complete ability to pardon people. So I don't see that happening.
Right, and a lot of times, aside from judicial review, there can be congressional investigations about pardons. There was a really famous one about when Mark Ridge was pardoned, and they interviewed his wife and tried to investigate the pardon, really see if it was a political tie. And so we can also see that sometimes Congress investigates these pardons too.
I was going to say, finally, the most important question, and we've ran out of time. Good job. Congratulations. We have some comments for you now. Let me start and say that I thought you did a very good job. You have definitely done all the necessary research, and it seems as if you're interested in these constitutional matters and these things that are going on. It's more than a class assignment or a project assignment for you. Y'all are well spoken. You did a good job in hitting the points in the opening question, and then you responded well to the questions that we presented to you. I just want to say to you that I hope that you will continue to use what you've learned and the leadership skills that you have to continue to be involved and participate and be good citizens into the future. Congratulations on participating today, and congratulations for a fine presentation. Good luck to you.
I agree completely. It was a fine presentation. I would call the presentation very good and the Q&A session even better. And sometimes with some teams, there's a bit of a drop off from the prepared presentation to dealing with questions in the moment. But to my ear, I thought it was a really rich discussion during the Q&A where you furnished information that wasn't in the prepared presentation, but that was relevant and applicable and thoughtful. And so I thought you really raised your game during the Q&A section, and that's not always the case with every team. I appreciated that you read the Federalist Papers here and there. You gave us some examples from the most recent impeachment case, and you drilled down with more detail than we've been hearing elsewhere today. So I appreciate that. Examples going way back early in our history. First mention today of President Taft, who was always kind of reticent to throw, well, I was going to say throw his weight around, sorry, but reticent to use his power too broadly. So I appreciated that. Good job today.
Yeah, and just to tie things up here in a nice bow, hopefully, would just agree with a lot of what's been said. There were things that I thought were initially missing from your opening statement that you guys found a way to tie into your Q&A portion. So for instance, when I asked about what the purpose of the pardon power was, you then brought up that this was an extension of English monarchy and got into that. And I really thought that was a good way of tying that up. So good job there. You brought in some good contemporary examples. It was nice to hear some Montana specific piece here. So that was a nice touch there. One thing, as a lawyer, and I know my colleagues are probably sick of me saying this, and because I that's what I do all day as I'm a lawyer. Is I like to see sort of a point and counterpoint. So if someone has a belief on something, so for my question, like, is the pardon power reviewable? And there is a question out there. I think I understand that maybe there's judicial precedent out there that says that the president can do whatever he wants, but that judge or that justice panel was reviewing it and said that. So I think there is an argument there, to say, okay, yes, it is, or no, it's not. And you guys did provide what you thought, which was that it wasn't. And that's, this is a discussion where there really are no wrong answers. It's really just how you buttress your opinions. So, but I would have liked to see more of the, yes, I agree with my colleague, or no, I disagree with my colleague. But again, just to echo, it was clear to follow what you guys were thinking. You provided some concrete examples as to blatant examples of violations. So you brought up Pickering, which is a more unique type of example that I think usually people focus on presidents. So that was nice to see. And you went through the gamut of the presidential impeachments too. So way to weave in a lot of good contemporary and historical examples.
Right, great job, you guys. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and send the judges to their breakout room, and have a great rest of your day. Good luck.
Thank you.